Hey virtual friend, welcome back to the room. My name is Lars and here we discuss games, movies, anime, and whatever else you want to talk about. So come take a spot on the couch and let's get into the video. Before you judge a book by its cover, know this. There's no Z access, the world is separated into loadable zones, there's no flying mounts or mounts in general. Guild Wars is bare bones compared to other multiplayer games, even of its time. It's not an MMO, it's a cooperative RPG. To be clear, even if you've played Guild Wars 2, this game is completely different. The only thing in common is the land and the lore. Guild Wars 1 combat resembles the style of Magic the Gathering, Phantom Dust, or even Diablo to an extent. Its story, though, is more on a linear RPG path. You can play 3 games solo, use AI companions, or battle with or against other players. It's far from a dead game and continues to exist due to the low manpower needed to run it. Only 2 people continue to oversee Guild Wars 1. They'll stay alive as long as people continue to explore and exist in Guild Wars 2. This is an adventure that respects your time and you'll come to respect it as well. In 2005, everything was online. Second Life, World of Warcraft, RuneScape, Star Wars Galaxies, Lineage 2, EverQuest 2, the list goes on and on. But I remember seeing one game on store shelves with a big tab in the box reading, online game with no fees. It felt like a godsend to me. I tried other games as a kid, but as soon as I saw the monthly subscription, that was the end of it. Coming from a working family, I got money from whatever I could, any odd jobs just to save up. A new controller would take months, and I would keep my PS2 on constantly because I didn't have a memory card. Week after week, I put whatever money I earned towards the game on layaway. Every time I walked past the copy on the shelf, I imagined fighting the bone dragon on the back cover, exploring the jungles, ruined cities, and whatever else the game threw my way. I still remember the day I got it. My dad was called for a side job that consisted of fixing a water leak under the house. It was pouring. My dad's the type of person to always help for those who ask. I remember covered in mud and red clay by the end of it, but when my dad got paid, he said, "How much is left in your game?" The game took hours to install, but that was fine. See, in older days, games wouldn't just come with a fold-out showing controls. It came with a manual. What made Guild Wars so cool is it wasn't just any manual. It was a history of the land of Tyria, the gods, an introduction to your new enemies, and even told tales of recent battles across the land. You were able to see the type of skills and deep dive into the characters, classes, and yes, there were pictures also. If you're interested, PDFs of the manual is still online through the wiki, but we'll discuss that later. Guild Wars Prophecies, Factions, and Nightfall are available on Steam through a Game of the Year bundle, but chances are you overlooked it or passed it up for its day to look. Even though it has a 93% score and rated as one of the best on Steam, people still miss it. Also, just to be clear, you want to purchase the trilogy. You can buy them separately, but that's a waste. There's also a Game of the Year edition, but that's only for Prophecies, does not include Factions or Nightfall. One unique part of Guild Wars 1 is that you can play each game standalone. You can have a character in Prophecies, run through the tutorial, then the main game without ever touching Factions or Nightfall. You can also create a character in Factions, and once you conquer your way through the major ports of the game, you can then travel to Prophecies or Nightfall and progress your stories without ever needing to finish Factions. You won't need to go through the tutorial again, instead you'll just progress from the point of the story. There's also DLC titled Eye of the North, but this video is going to be complex and my job is to entice you with the thrill of checking this game out, not the end game. Before we jump into mechanics, let's discuss the opening plot of Prophecies and how the game title came to be. The name Guild Wars is referred to when the volcano erupted off the coast of Krita, which houses the Bloodstones. The Bloodstones are 5 shards created by the gods Tyria and are said to hold immense power. Once humanity discovered this, the regions formed into guilds and raced to get a hold of that power. Prophecy starts out in the Third Guild Wars. The Char, a tribe of BC warriors, emerged from the north and began destroying human colonies. Their savagery and radical shamanistic beliefs offered no mercy to the broken groups spread across Tyria. This is where we begin. The story of Factions starts off in Cantha with the player being introduced as a promising trainee under Master Togo. While being introduced to the minister, the students realize something's terribly wrong. A disease spreads across the minister's estate and turns them into vile creatures, the minister included. A great evil through the name of Shiro Tagachi is at the head, and your mission is to warn the emperor and stop the disease with the help of Brother Menlo from Tyria. In the third game, Nightfall, this takes place in the land of Ilana. We just joined the Order of the Sun Spears, an elite group that has pledged to defend the nation against all threats. They only answer to the Spear Marshals, the highest rank of Sun Spear. We first protect Chombeck village from Corsairs. These are pirates that normally drift between Cantha and Ilana. From there on through our work, we stumble into vile creatures teleporting out of chaos rifts in Ilana and Cantha. The Zacian Order from Cantha assists, and through their help, the shroud is lifted. We suspect someone from the Order of the Sun Spears is causing this. When you start a new character, you start by creating a new class. Classes are broken up between the core group: Warrior, Ranger, Monk, Necromancer, Mesmer, and Elementalist. These are available through the start of any game, but your character's facial features and hairstyle will change based on that region. Your character's overall design will change based on these classes as well. Factions provides the Assassin and Ritualist class, while Nightfall provides the Paragon and Dervish. You can only play as a human, but you can get other races as teammates later on. The Warrior is exactly what it sounds like. You are the front line. Use adrenaline gain from attacks to buff yourself or break through the enemy using energy. Your focus is to tank damage, knock down the enemy with hammers, or make them bleed with axes and swords. The Ranger is your archer class with a twist. You can focus on range with the added bonus of having a pet to attack with you. If you find a warthog in the wild, you can tame it. You can also find creatures like firehounds or phoenix later on and switch them out instead. The Monk's goal is healing with damage absorption or firing off holy damage that ignores armor. You keep your team alive, and honestly, that's quite the challenge. The Necromancer is my favorite of the bunch. You can break them down with disease and steal health. You can also use dead bodies to conjure up flesh beasts to fight for you. You conjure up beasts that can steal health, attack from range, tank the enemy, or even morph into other creatures when they pass. Imagine finding a tough group of enemies, and every time someone dies, allies included, you morph their corpse into multiple creatures that can attack enemies on sight. Be aware though, their health drains over time. The Mesmer is for players who enjoy the thrill of disrupting combat, stealing energy, and debuffing the enemy. Is a resurrection spell about to go off? Disrupt it, and the enemies adjacent to that target will also be interrupted. They're great for powerful enemies and bosses. Some foes can knock through your team easily, and the Mesmer prevents that. The Elementalist uses fire, water, ice, and earth to rain down the elements. Each element offers a different style of play. Fire focuses on AoE burn damage, while earth can slow them down. The only downside of these abilities is you really can't distinguish what was cast by a teammate versus an enemy. The Assassin focuses on teleporting for damage using daggers. You'll disrupt the flow of combat, then teleport back to your team for safety. You're the glass cannon. One bad move could break the team, but you also do quick damage. You can specialize in skills that make you unable to be targeted, but be warned, AoE damage still hurts a lot. The Ritualist is sort of like a Necromancer, except you provide buffs through enchanted items while also using spirits to heal and attack. You can produce these spirits anywhere, but they are chained in place. They can offer effects like +2 health per second, steal health with each attack, or absorb any damage taken in the vicinity. Enchanted items are also very interesting. You can give a warrior an enchanted sword that provides +5 health per second, or you can hold an urn that will give you +30 energy. I've encountered multiple bugs though. Two recent examples are a spirit that's supposed to revive on death, or an urn that's supposed to revive on drop. Occasionally they just don't activate. Both provide no additional information, so I assume the problem lies in the skill itself. The Paragon is the commander of the team. Their weapon of choice is a spear and shield, and they attack from range. They shout out battle cries that buff the party and can even heal through them. They are also known for protection skills and focus on combating hexes and condition skills such as bleeding. The best way I can describe them is an AoE buffing ranged warrior. The Dervish is probably the most unique of the bunch. They specialize in scythe mastery and battle through enchantments. Through the power of the gods, using wind and earth prayers, they can buff themselves to be faster and provide more defense. They attack multiple foes at once with their dances and scythe mastery. Once you pick your class, you can choose from male and female. Your options consist of hairstyles, hair color, faces, and skin tone. You can change the color of your starting armor, but this has no effect on future armor. Crafted gear will always be crafted with a gray color. Choosing a name consists of a first name and last name. Make sure to write it down or have a way to remember it. Now, I say that because if you're locked out of your account for whatever reason, you'll need to provide verification by email, name, date of birth, and also character name from your account. This has happened to me multiple times, whether due to inactivity or a new unrecognized device. I've also found if you delete the Guildwars.dat file from your computer, it will cause that computer to be unrecognized. Luckily, the Guildwars support team is tied to Guild Wars 2, so don't expect to be locked out forever. We're only on the first layer, but don't worry, no one class is overpowered, they just synergize based on their abilities. Also, you can't change your primary class after this point. So if you decide to be a ranger, and then 5 hours later you don't like it, you'll have to just start a new character. Each self-contained story provides in-game cutscenes where your character will interact and speak. Most of the time, you aren't the focus of the scene, which I actually do enjoy. The cheesiest part in cutscenes is characters will only do what you could do in-game. For example, if someone congratulates you, they will use the same cheer that you have. Attacks and abilities will also be the same. You may think this is a minus, but I think it adds the feel of the game. There's no flashy scenes of heroics, no crazy flips, just exactly what you could do in battle, and you'll soon recognize the skill and effects used. The voice actors include greats such as Greg Berger, Steve Bloom, Nolan North, Diane Michelle, Julianne Busher, and Carrie Walgren. If you don't know who they are, here's a few notable roles. Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh, Tom from Tsunami, Nolan North from literally anything, multiple females in Morrowind, Oblivion, Skyrim, and even Haruko from Fooly Cooly. Even if the cutscenes seem cheesy or the characters bug out, the voice acting is always amazing. Sometimes allies and enemies will be attacked in the background of cutscenes. Say you don't kill all the surrounding enemies and then you defeat the boss. It'll switch to cutscene, and then in the background, it'll just be the enemies smacking you in the back of the head. The same applies to undead minions and spirits. You can say this is a flaw, but honestly, this is the prime time comedic effect of this game, and I love it. When you load in, you'll spawn at the nearest social space you left. The games run as hub instances, not servers. For example, if you create a new character in Prophecies, you'll load into Ascalon City, District 1. If District 1 has max number of players, then you'll load in District 2. This way, cities aren't overpopulated and the connectivity is still optimal for all players. Cities are the only place you will encounter other players. Once you leave the social space, only your party will appear. When you load in, you'll spawn in the nearest social space you left. The game runs as hub instances, not servers. For example, if you create a new character in Prophecies, you'll load into Ascalon City District 1. If District 1 is full, you'll load in District 2. This way, cities are not overpopulated and the connectivity is still optimal for all players. Towns and cities are the only places you'll encounter other players. Once you leave that social space, only your party will appear. Movement in Guild Wars is simple yet aggravating at times. You can click the left mouse button to move, and holding the right mouse button will allow you to rotate the camera. You can also use the WASD keys to move, but inclined surfaces is where this game starts to get annoying. You'll think you walk down a hill, only to see your character stop. Some edges include invisible barriers. I'm not gonna lie, this is literally the worst part of the game. I've gotten frustrated just walking into an area to where I have to backtrack 10 minutes because I can't walk down a hill. There is no jump feature in this game. The space button instead offers an auto run feature to whatever you have targeted. For example, if you click on 87 gold down the field, but stop for whatever reason, you could simply just press the space bar to auto run towards it. It also works for anything in proximity if you don't have anything targeted. So if you kill one enemy, you can press the space bar and it'll auto target the next enemy. The UI is very customizable and deserves all the praise. You are able to switch any key as well as mix and match all the panels on your screen. You can choose not to display certain features such as party list, tips, or even your health bar. You can change the size of each display or where they're located. For example, you could take your health bar, put it vertically or horizontally, top, bottom, side to side, wherever you want. You can also emote and use other commands to provide useful information to you. For example, you could use /dance to make your character, well, dance, but it's not going to be pretty. You can also wave, sit, or even play air instruments. Other useful commands are /age, which will show you the total playtime and your character's playtime. If you get stuck for whatever reason, you can use /stuck and the game will try to recorrect your movements. Most of these commands are optional, but they're fast to use in drop-down menus or clicking on other players and using panels such as trading. For example, clicking on a player and clicking trade, you can just use /trade in their name. In main cities, you'll have vendors such as merchants, skill vendors, armorers, weapon crafters, and Zunlai storage chests. In large cities, it's super easy to get lost. NPCs will appear as green, yellow, or white triangles in your compass. You can use the Alt key to find any NPC or interactable. Players and henchmen can be used finding the control key instead. The Zunlai storage chest is a large upgradable system that can store your loot, materials, and money between all your characters. You are unable to use the Zunlai storage chest in pre-searing Ascalon, but once you leave that tutorial space, it'll be accessible to you. Almost every other social area will have a merchant and Zunlai storage chest. Armors, for example, are only located in large cities. You may find collectors out in the wild which offer gear or enemy-specific loot, but they won't tell you where to acquire that at all. For example, if a vendor offers gear for 5 natural seeds, you'll need to locate that firsthand. They won't tell you where they're located. Normally it's in the same area though. Potential quests do not appear on your minimap, only your active quest. Green exclamation points appear above NPCs to show who offers a quest, but sometimes clicking on a question mark in a conversation will also lead to a new one. If you're looking for certain NPCs or items in the wild, you'll just have to pray and hold down the Alt key. A potential quest tab is a big miss. Sure, you can argue I should learn to explore, but it's also really easy to miss fun quests. Perhaps the quest tab could have shown nearby quest givers and a description of the quest, but luckily you don't have a set number of quests, so I would grab all the ones you see in your travels. You can always go back later to them. The quests you've acquired will be separated in main quest and then regions in your quest tab. Once completed, they'll be marked as completed, and you just need to go back to the NPC to collect a reward. I recommend minimizing locations you aren't in to avoid confusion. Some quests may want you to go relatively close to other quests, so watch out for that as well. A green star will show you where the focus quest is on the compass. If it's in a different area, the star will be focused on the portal to the new zone. On your large map, if the quest is in a new zone, it will show a green arrow pointing to it along with its name. And if you're in your zone map using the U button, you'll see the path you've walked with red dots. This will help definitely later on when you're in missions. Once you're ready, you can walk out of the city and you get transported into your own instance. Every story beat you've done is recognized in that space. For example, if someone from the city has a quest that states meet me in front of the gates of Ascalon, they'll be there waiting for you in that instance. But they'll disappear once the quest is completed. Remember, once you enter the wild, you cannot change your skills, edit your attribute points, or encounter other players. If you need to make any of these changes, you'll have to go back to the city. You can also use the control key to see enemies and allies in the wild. This will help targeting special enemies like healers. Just click on them and your character will auto run towards them and attack. You do not need to spam click them. The only actions you perform on the fly are your skills, but we'll get to that later. For now, the biggest thing you need to focus on are the enemy types and their abilities. Training yourself to pay attention to enemy types is essential. You'll begin to notice, oh hey, this enemy is a priest, I should fight him first who doesn't heal his teammates. If you don't prioritize and time your abilities, you'll prolong battles, or even worse, be in the path of multiple enemy groups and die. This may not be an issue starting out, but once you get into missions, if you die, you fail, there's no respawns. Enemies and allies use the same skills available to that particular class. For example, if I'm fighting a Mesmer type character, and they use Conjure Phantasm, I'll recognize and say, oh, I need to stop that before I get -5 health a second. This also means they can heal and res just as you do. Named enemies are also tougher than normal enemies you encounter. They will sometimes have a glow adjacent to their class, so if you see a named enemy with a yellow highlight, they may have a special skill available for warriors like we've taken. They will also be more of a challenge, but more on that later. The other cool part of the private environment is you don't need to worry about enemy respawn times. So if the quest step is to kill 5 wolves, but you die killing 3 of them, once you're resurrected, only 2 of the enemies will remain. You may think this makes the game overly easy, but there's some things that go on that will definitely make you change your mind. A resurrection shrine is a small altar in the wild. You'll be teleported to the closest one when you die, but you'll need to activate it first. Once you walk into the shrine, a ball of light will shine in the center of the altar. That's when you know it's activated. Sometimes, you may need to interact with the NPC in front of the altar to activate it. Missions generally do not allow you to use resurrection shrines. Some missions will even have the shrines destroyed. More on missions later. In tutorial areas, there is no debuff for dying. Later on though, you'll receive a negative percentage of your health and energy. This can go up to -60%. You can fix this by defeating enemies or leaving that instance. And FYI, your armor and weapons do not deteriorate. If you're with NPCs and there's no one in your party with the resurrection skill when you die, you'll automatically start resurrecting. If you're alive and your team is not, they will stay dead. If you play real people, dead players will need to be revived using skills. Loot is often enemy specific, but they will have the option to drop gold or general items such as swords. I recommend bringing a salvage kit and identification kit. When an item drops, it is assigned to a single ally, meaning no one else can grab it. Your heroes though, can use your assigned gear, but they're unable to pick it up themselves. Assigned items will show up in the text channel. For example, if you're in a team of 8 and a yellow die drops, it'll say, die yellow has dropped for Booty Lover 98. Gold is not ally specific, but will split amongst the team. Some gear will drop with stats stating unidentified, but we'll get to that later. When you start out, you only have a backpack with 20 inventory slots. Later on, you can get belt pouches, bags, and even larger equipment bags, but still, you're gonna run out of space really quick. If by chance you leave a mission without grabbing all the items, no worries. An unclaimed box will appear once that mission is complete. There's a 12 item limit, but it'll go away after 10 minutes. All gold is lost. If you fail the mission though, the loot lost will not be available to be claimed. Once you've done a few tutorial quests, you'll be asked to choose a secondary class. No one option is the best. There's just classes and skills that synergize well together. You are not locked into a secondary class per character. Later on, you'll be able to switch secondary classes and they'll stay unlocked. So say you choose to be a warrior with the secondary class as a ranger because you like the idea of having a pet to fight with you, but you're just not healing yourself fast enough. You can then go to a secondary class vendor and switch to a warrior/monk for a small fee. By now, you'll have noticed the amazing soundtrack by Jeremy Soule. This is the man who's composed multiple Elder Scrolls games, Harry Potter series, Baldur's Gate, multiple Star Wars games, World of Warcraft, and even the Warhammer series, just to name a few. Whether you're relaxing in the pastures of pre-Syrian Ascalon, fighting Corsairs on the coast of Filona, or battling Shiro and his diseased minions in Ryzu Palace, you'll love the sound of Guild Wars. Any Guild Wars fan can hum or even yell the theme as soon as you log into the game. There's not a single track I dislike, but sadly, it's not on Spotify. The rest of his work is there though. After a few tutorial quests, you may be thinking, okay, what if I can't find any players to play with? This is where NPCs called Henchmen come in. Everywhere, except the Prophecies tutorial area, you'll have the option to recruit Henchmen to help you out. In Prophecies and Factions, they're locked to NPCs who are at level for that area. For example, in Ascalon, you'll have 3 other spots you can fill with a warrior, monk, ranger, or elementalist. They're at the same level as the monsters outside. Later on, you'll be able to recruit 7 others, and they may be at level 20. Don't worry though, if you explore with them through multiple areas, they'll continue to match the levels of the monsters. You aren't penalized for using them. The henchman system should honestly be praised. The healers heal and keep the group alive. Mesmers are swift with their interruptions, and the necromancer will create minions as soon as a corpse drops. There's no need for an over-the-shoulder playstyle or worrying about which skill they're casting. In case you are worried though, on the compass there's 3 flag options that when dropped will make your team run towards them. If you notice your team spreading out and attacking multiple enemies, you can use the control key and click the enemy you want them to attack. This will cause your character to shout and ping the compass, and in turn your team to focus on that specific enemy. I've also learned that you can use your henchmen to body block enemies from killing you. You can pass through players' bodies in cities, but unable to run through NPCs and enemies in the wild. Later on, if you're targeted by multiple enemies with 2/3 of your health suddenly gone, if you circle around your teammates, the enemy may redirect their attacks. The same sadly applies to your henchmen. As a caster, for example, if you're targeting a monk and there's 3 enemies between them and your warrior, the warrior may just stand in place, unable to attack. In Nightfall and Eye of the North, you'll unlock heroes that offer customizable loadouts and skills. Once you unlock them, you can add them to your party from anywhere. They are character specific, not account specific. So if you have a character in Nightfall that has unlocked them, but have another character in pre-Syrian Ascalon, you can't use them there. They'll level up just as you do. You can give them new weapons, pick their specific attributes and skills, but the armor is linked to quests and specific NPCs. You can also decide to give them a secondary class, and for the most part, they play them pretty well. Later on, they'll even have quests which offer upgrades. These are dependent if they are in your party, or sometimes they need to not be in your party to activate the quest. The leveling experience in Guild Wars is different from what you're used to. The level cap is 20, which you're going to hit in a casual amount of time. The point isn't to grind, but to experience the quests and skills at a casual pace. You'll mold your playstyle based on what you've learned through the battles and your experiences. Once you hit level 20, the number of allocated skill points to use towards your attributes are maxed out. Any further stats will need to be adjusted using runes, but let's go over armor and weapons first. The armor caps out at 60 to 80 depending on your class. The highest is a warrior, then 70 for ranger, and then 60 for caster classes. There are basic sets which you can craft fairly easily once you get halfway through the game. There are also prestige armor sets, which look more badass but don't provide any particular value. You'll need a lot more materials to craft them. Some sets are made by vendors difficult to find, or are only offered at the end of the games, which means if you want to craft them, you have to bring all the materials to the final fight, and then pray you win. Good luck. You may have noticed by now you can use any weapon, but in order to unlock its full potential, you'll need to meet the required attribute level. For example, if you find a stat that says requires 9 death magic and you're an elementalist, sure, I mean, you could use it, but its power is going to be limited. You can craft weapons in cities, find them from collectors, or travel in the vast lands and pray that you're lucky. The biggest downside to gear revolves around the introduced classes Assassin, Ritualist, Paragon, and Dervish. They suffer the most when it comes to other campaigns. As a warrior, I can go through any campaign and find armor and weapons relative to my class, but as an assassin, if I'm in Prophecies, I'm not going to find any daggers, and there won't be any armorers who can give me any new armor sets. The only armor options available outside of factions are the prestige sets at the end of Nightfall. But for the Dervish class, for example, I will never find any armor or weapons relative to my class in factions or Prophecies. The developers never retroactively made gear for new classes. It feels completely outdated even for its time. You could argue it's for lore reasons, but then why as a ritualist can I acquire prestige sets in Nightfall? It just boggles my mind. Guild Wars is split up into multiple quests, missions, and dungeons. Dungeons are only found in Eye of the North and include some of the harder endgame content. We won't discuss them in this video. I've listed this past tutorial stages of the game because you'll mostly be on a specific quest line until a certain point. Then, you'll enter your first mission and progress past tutorial stages of the game. Quests are split up into the following: solo, mini missions, master difficulty, repeatable, hero, and flashback. Solo quests, master difficulty quests, and repeatable quests are pretty self-explanatory. Hero quests offer a hero to be unlocked or upgraded. Flashback quests let you relive past moments in lore, some you weren't even a part of. There are also missions, which are special zones. There are 4 types. Cooperative missions progress the story and may include heroes and henchmen. Few missions require certain heroes to progress. Competitive missions are battles between the 2 warring factions, Luxian and Kurzik. No henchmen heroes are allowed. Challenge missions are point-allotted missions which provide rewards for higher scores. You are permitted to use heroes and henchmen. There are also a few elite missions which offer higher skilled foes. These came out prior to dungeons, so some of them allow for 12 players. Normally though, you're not allowed to use henchmen. These missions can run anywhere from 10 minutes and up and offer no resurrection shrines. On the map, they will appear as a flashing shield. Once all steps of the missions are completed, it will appear as a shield with 2 swords over it. There's also no checkpoints, so if you fail an objective or die, the mission will need to be restarted. An example is a cooperative mission in Sunjiang District in Goer's factions. We were doing fairly well up until the bosses. I noticed one of them was an assassin and the other was an elementalist. I didn't prioritize my target, and in turn the elementalist came up and used a touch skill that burned everyone who was around him. 3 people died instantly, and one of them was an NPC that was required to survive. Were we having a tough time to begin with? No. I just got lazy and didn't prioritize my targets. Didn't time my skills, and I didn't focus on team placement. And in turn, 10 minutes down the drain. It sucks. I mean, I wish there were checkpoints, but what are you gonna do? Now that we've gone over the basics, let's move over to attributes and skills to maximize your output. When you open the skill tab, you'll notice a lot of information. Up top will be your attributes and under it will be your skill list. Skills gain value or lose power based on the specific attribute. For example, if I'm an elementalist with no points allocated in fire magic, fire skills I use will have little to no effect. As a necromancer, the more points I have allocated in death magic, the more undead minions I can control at once. Each class also has its own specialized attribute that is unattainable as a secondary class. These are called primary attributes. Necromancers have a primary attribute called soul reaping. For each point in soul reaping, you gain 1 energy whenever a non-spirit creature near you dies. For monks, divine favor offers a healing bonus to all monk spells, including their duration. No other class will be able to tune these skills. There are multiple skill types at your disposal. Guild Wars has over 30 skill types, but to avoid confusion, we're only going over equipable skills pertinent to classes. Enchantments and party bonuses provided via NPCs are not going to be discussed. Skills are acquired through leveling up, but you can also receive them by purchasing them or through specific quests. Skill vendors you encounter may not provide the same skills. Say you missed a resurrection skill in pre-Syrian Ascalon because you didn't have anyone to go on you with the quest. You can purchase it later on with the skill vendor. It only required gold and a skill point. You receive skill points from leveling up. Even if you're at max level 20, you'll still gain experience and skill points. There are melee attacks, which include skills based on the class-specific weapons such as swords or hammers. They can only be utilized while having the acquired weapon equipped. They offer skills based around the weapon itself. For example, a hammer will focus on knockdown damage, while a dagger will focus on multiple skills back to back. There are pet attacks which are utilized via rangers. You can focus on entirely controlling your pet's abilities and heal them over time, and if they do die in battle, you can also revive them. Chants and shouts are a one-time benefit provided to all allies in earshot. For example, you can give allies up to 90 health when they cast their next spell. Allies are not required to be targeted since this is an AoE effect. Picture you going in combat and your allies getting pumped. These are also tough to counter. Chants and shouts also go hand in hand with echoes. These are activated or reactivated whenever a chant is cast. For example, activating aggressive refrain will allow you to attack 25% faster for 25 seconds. If someone activates a chant in your vicinity, it'll reactivate again, restarting the timer. Condition effects are broken down to the following: bleeding, blind, burning, cracked armor, crippled, dazed, deep wound, disease, poison, and weakness. Bleeding is when the target loses its blood over time. Suffering from blindness causes 9% of all attacks to miss. Burning causes the target to lose health over time. Cracked armor will take minus 20 out of your armor with a minimum of 60. So if your total armor stat is 60, it will not affect you. Crippled causes the one suffering to move 50% slower. And while you're dazed, it will take twice as long to cast spells, and they're really easy to be interrupted. Deep wound creates an injury that makes your maximum health be decreased by 20%. Healing benefits are also lessened. While suffering from a disease, you lose health over time. It can also be contagious between the same species of creature. Poison causes the suffering to lose health over time. Weakness may be the most interesting. You deal 65% less damage, and all your attributes are decreased by 1. So, meaning, if you're using a sword that uses 9 swordsmanship, and you only have 9, any weakness ailment will make your sword pretty much useless. The cool aspect to conditions effects is the target's health bar will change based on the condition's effect. For example, a deep wound will show a section of the health bar grayed out, while poison and disease will show the health bar slime-colored green. These also provide visual effects. Disease, for example, may have a ring around the enemy with small flies flying around them. These are going to be useful later on when we discuss enchantments and debuffs. Ritual skills consist of nature rituals used by rangers and binding rituals used by ritualists. The nature ritual creates a spirit which provides a global effect. An example is frozen soil. The created spirit will cause all creatures in range to be unable to use resurrection skills. Ritual skills consist of 2 types of spirits, attack spirits and passive spirits. Attack spirits fire projectiles at targets but are chained down. They can also lifesteal or interrupt attacks. Passive spirits affect all foes or allies within range. They can provide healing to your own team, for example. Glyphs are utilized by elementalists. They create additional effects for your next skill. For example, Glyph of Lesser Energy will cause your next 2 spells to use 18 less energy. Signets are used via every class but differ from other skills. They do not use energy, but often have a longer cooldown rate. Now, let's move on to the most confusing part of skills, spells. You may have thought the 2 are the same, but they're not. Every spell is a skill, but not every skill is a spell. Spells consist of enchantments, hexes, item spells, wards, and wells. Spells require energy to activate and utilize an activation time. Enchantment spells buff a target or party. Hex spells hinder or diminish the target's abilities such as cast time. Item spells create a bundle item in the caster's hands which have an effect until dropped. Ward spells create an AoE effect around the caster or -1 around the enemy. Weapon spells add a benefit that can even change the weapon attack. These cannot be ended prematurely unlike item spells that can be dropped. Well spells exploit a corpse to create a zoned effect around the corpse. The toughest part about spells and conditions is how they appear on the target's health bar. For example, if the target is enchanted, a yellow triangle pointing upward is displayed on their health bar. If they are hexed, a purple down triangle will be displayed on the health bar. You can see if the target has an enchantment or hex, sure, but what you don't know is what the target is actually afflicted with. For example, if there are 2 hexes on the target, only 1 purple triangle is going to show. If the target is hexed and has a disease, the health bar could slowly go down as purple or green instead. If you could hover over them and see what they're currently afflicted with, it'd be great, but it's super easy to get confused and attack the same target with the same skill twice. Also, to add to the frustration, the same condition or spell does not stack on that target. Not having an enchantment bar or skill icon on the target is a big miss, to be honest. Creating builds is essential, but knowing you won't be able to track exactly what the target is hit with creates confusion constantly. You can see this on yourself, but nobody else. The other interesting aspect of skills is that you can only use 8 at a time. You can interchange these as well as your attributes, but only in social instances. Once you leave a town, they will be grayed out and you will be unable to edit them. The only time you can edit this is when you level up or receive a skill during a quest. This forces you to really think about which abilities are useful together. For example, having a bunch of high damage skills may seem like the way to go, but if you don't have a way to heal yourself or require energy, you're not going to last long. The other big obstacle to understanding skills is activation time. Earlier, we discussed how some spells need time to activate, while weapon skills normally do not. If you aren't tracking your enemies though, they can pop off a resurrection skill or knock down your team easily. Some bosses can tank damage and self-heal quickly if you don't pay attention. If you aren't focusing your skills when they heal, the fight can go on and on into a stalemate. To be fair, I don't think this is a bad thing. I think it adds to the challenge of the game. Instead of grinding to be more powerful, you focus on the mechanics and skills at hand. Signets can be bought via the skill vendor. You will need to acquire the signet of capture each time you want to get a new elite skill. You can only use 1 elite skill at a time. These can be categorized by any type of skill, but are more powerful and unique compared to others. An example is the warrior elite skill called Skullcrack. Interrupts an action, also inflicts dazed condition for 10 seconds, if the target is casting a spell. Seems pretty self-explanatory and easy to use, but you can't get that anywhere. You have to find Hail Black Ice in Spearhead Peak or Havoc-kin in Darkrime Delves. How do I know this? Well, say hello to the wiki. Normally, reading is terrible and frowned upon for any game. Why should I have to open up a new tab and explore the wiki page for information not included in the game? What's the point if the game doesn't explain it to you? Think of it like this. You come across a new vendor for armor and you think, wow, that's a lot of material. I could make it, but is it worth it? You look up on the wiki and see next town over, there's another armor with better stats. You would have known that without asking the question. As time goes on, it's tough to not get overwhelmed. You'll get a new skill and think it's good, but you don't have any other skills that go well with it. Some enemies will just run through your whole team with 1 or 2 skills. Some skills you just don't understand how it could ever be useful. There's over 3,500 skills in Guild Wars 1, and these skills can be obtained and used in thousands of ways. The same applies to secondary classes. The wiki offers an entire section to classes that synergize well as note specific skills to go out for. There's particular builds, PvE and PvP, and what to avoid. You can be a Mesmer with the playstyle of shutting down an entire team. You can be a monk that nukes everything around them. You can be an assassin that specializes in casting and no melee. No one build is superior, they're just different. One useful tool you may have missed is the skill loadouts tool. There's a floppy disk icon on the skills tab that allows you to save your skills and attribute levels. It'll also let you load them and rename them over time. This drastically helps with playstyles and can be utilized for hero characters. It's especially useful when you mix and match skills on a hero and transfer it account wide. Are you confused yet? Good, because there's more. Most games you play offer mods for armor and weapons. Guild Wars is a little different, but in a good way. You may have acquired gear with an unidentified stat. If you identify this stat, it'll show that there's a modification on it. These can come in the form of runes, grips, pommels, wrappings, handles, and cores once you dismantle it using the salvage kit. For example, you find a blue axe on the ground. When you identify it, it shows a +4 armor rating. This is not active when the item is unidentified. Using the salvage kit once identified may break the axe based on the salvage kit's rarity, but you will receive the axe grip. This can then be used on any other axe you receive. Runes are more interesting. Runes can be attached to armor and offer overall buffs such as health +30 or class attribute buffs such as beast mastery +1. They are broken up into minor, major, and superior runes. Here's an example. Minor offers +1, major +2 but -35 health, and finally superior +3 but also subtracts 75 health. These are also non-stacking. If you already have a hilt on a sword and you go to place another hilt on it, the pre-existing mod will disappear. Sadly, during this process, it does not show you what you will be losing prior to adding the modification. If you use a class rune on a specific armor piece, the affected attribute stat will now be blue on the skills tab. Hovering over it will say something along the lines of X stat is normally 7, but with superior rune of 3, it is now 10. An interesting part of higher level mods are the downsides. A cool example is I got a vampiric spear the other night while playing. Every time I hit a target, I steal 5 health from them, but every second I've equipped, I lose 1 health a second. Is it worth it? You may think no, that doesn't account for much, but +5 health could even be better with quicker attack speed or health generation skills to cancel out that -1. The balancing doesn't stop with your character either. Even though we discussed every class and their perks, you'll notice when you're missing a key role on your team. Say you decide not to use an elementalist in your group for a mission. Most missions are a breeze, but then you come across a group of 2 healers. You're watching them heal the party and heal each other before you can even put enough damage in, all because you don't have anyone capable of AoE damage. This is a game where you get as much as you put in. If you want a classic adventure, this game is for you. If you want a casual experience, this game is still for you. If you want challenging endgame content where you can nuke groups, enemies all at once, you're right, you got that here too. Guild Wars is a game that sticks to your mind even after you stop playing, but only for good reasons. There's thousands of skills. The combinations between all your skills are infinite. You can base your 8 skills only on your main class, secondary class, or a mix of both. Plus you have 7 other heroes to customize on top of that. For as long as I've played, I've never encountered a player that says, you can't do this because you're playing as an X. I remember vividly a monk was speedrunning between Lion's Arch and Draknar's Forge, which is the first armor you come across with max gear. I was so confused. He gave me some tips, skills to utilize, and paths to follow. As long as you're willing to learn, you'll find a way to adapt and succeed. My biggest joy in playing Guild Wars is the motivation to improve. I want to test out new abilities and styles of play. It's never a dull moment because even when I'm not playing, I'm looking up new gear, skills, or areas to explore. Once you complete your first campaign, the option for hard mode is unlocked for all level 20 characters in your account. You'll get more rewards, better drops, plus a chance for additional titles in exchange for insane level enemies. A red helmet will appear in your party list while in outposts or cities. Simply switch to it and you'll get to enjoy all the tough enemies the game has to offer. How tough, may you ask? Well, enemies are at higher levels, have higher attribute levels, and move 33% to 50% faster. Those skills recharge quicker, and their activation times are slimmed down. You may think, no worries, I can just respawn and keep fighting. Well, not exactly. If your team gets a 60% death penalty, you'll wipe and you'll go to last town or outpost. I mean, hey, you get 50% more experience though. This leads me on to the next 2 points, PvP and guilds. If you notice at the character creation screen, you could have either made a player versus environment character or a player versus player only character. Player versus player characters offer all core skills unlocked up front. You're unable to play the story content with them, but you start at level 20. You can take a PvE character and play PvP with them though. With 3,500 plus skills unlocked in the game, you're probably doubting it'd be a fun experience, but you're wrong. Skills are tuned differently between PvE and PvP. PvP skills, for example, are debuffed to avoid soloing the enemy and one-shotting anyone. I will only be going over this and not showing any gameplay primarily because I'm not part of a guild and I don't focus on PvP anymore. Everything you unlocked in PvE is available for use in PvP. So an example would be an elite skill you acquired for your assassin out in the wild. It's now available for your PvP only character. Multiplayer is spread between different game modes, capturing control points, defeating enemy guild leaders, scoring higher kill counts, or playing just normal deathmatch. You're also able to access lower level PvP areas throughout the game. For example, once you're in the post-Syrian Ascalon city, characters level 10 and below can battle out in the nearby arena. Sadly, when I tried this out, I was able to find a match. Guilds are also a form of PvP. You can join any guild or create one through the register in local cities. This is account-based, not character-based. You'll get customized capes to your guilds and even rep your team's emblem. The coolest aspect by far is that your guild can purchase a guild hall. Your guild hall could be the Isle of the Dead, filled with vast catacombs, or the Burning Isle, a base located in the middle of a volcano. Simply speak to the ambassador to be taken to each of the 16 locations and purchase whichever one you like. You can employ a weaponsmith, dye trader, merchant, or even a festival hat keeper. You can just hang out with your buddies in the guild and enjoy your new social space. This is your own private getaway. I love guilds and their implementation in Guild Wars 1. The level of interaction is astounding and it pains me that games today just don't offer something like this. In Destiny 2, for example, we have clans, but all you get are 5 perks each season and a clan roster. It's literally a glorified LFG that mainly acts as a hangout spot on Discord, not even in the game. I can't go to a town or a ship and see all 100 of my friends in that clan. But in Guild Wars 1, we can pick different themes and there's no player limit to each guild hall. From here on, you can enter into alliances with 9 other guilds. You'll enter an allegiance with the Kurziks, a gothic themed people of Ekavald Forest, or the Luxians, nomadic people that dwelling in the Jade Sea. They're fleshed out in factions. You can also test your power in guild versus guild combat. You either defeat the enemy leader, or defeat all enemies or a 60% debuff. The maps are the bases you've chosen and upgraded over time. You'll even have NPCs such as archers, footmen, and bodyguards helping you. If you haven't played Guild Wars 1 recently, or at all, you may find it weird for me to talk about PvP. Question's always, is this a dead game? Do I think this is a dead game? No, absolutely not. We went over how the game is run by 2 people since the resources required is so minute compared to Guild Wars 2. We talked about interchangeable campaigns, we discussed the thousands of skills. Even as a solo player, there's nothing holding you back from exploring the vast lands across Prophecies, Factions, or Nightfall. Understanding what to expect of Guild Wars 1 is the only requirement. It's an expansive world full of detailed, character-driven story. It's a game full of skill while also offering a casual experience to sit back and play without ever worrying about how much time you put in. There aren't overly complicated mechanics, you aren't forced to play for long sessions. You could log out for 5 months at a time, come back, and still know what to do. Out of all the games I played growing up, I remember Guild Wars 1 the fondest. I remember when I first crafted my plate mail armor as a warrior. I remember coming across the first water drake and getting my ass demolished. I remember fighting Char with my buddy across the wall in pre-Syrian Ascalon. The memories of being teleported by Shiro and somehow making it back to the group just to win still pumps me up. When I replay an old mission, I still remember the dialogue from cutscenes or even how tough some of these bosses were. I remember hanging with the Kurzik brethren and fighting along my way to victories and tournaments. Maybe it's the nostalgia, maybe I do forgive a lot of old mechanics, wonky movements, or even outdated graphics. All I know is, I will continue to log in here and there and just go on adventures. Put it on your wish list, give it a shot next time it's on sale. There's no fear of missing out because the game's still standing and it's going to be here for years to come. Hey VirtuaFriend, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you love Guild Wars 1, make sure you leave a comment telling me some of your favorite memories. Maybe we can start our own guild together in the future. If you did enjoy the video, come check me out on Twitch. I look forward to seeing you interact on stream. Until next time, folks.